art is expressing our authenticity. This idea of whether you're an artist or I'm not an artist, it kind of just dissolves, and we just really just dive in that enjoyment of being human and being vulnerable as when we jump into that creative process, it's terrifying because you have to face uncertainty, you have to be willing to fail, you're going to be seen in this vulnerability of uncertainty and failing, but when we do that with grace and joy and in company of one another, then just art can be such a beautiful container for us to connect in a very one-on-one real way.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to It's a Matter of Speaking, a podcast for leading voices in the arenas of health, wealth, and relationships. I'm your host, Dylan. I'm a huge Detroit Lions fan. They're just coming off a big W. Let's go Lions. Hashtag one pride. Hashtag grit. Hashtag Dan Campbell. But no, I also run this podcast for these leading voices, and we want to reach people that are leading voices in their industry. To one, spread their message. One, let you know as a listener that there's people like that out there. And then number two, potentially reach anyone out there that wants to be a leading voice themselves. You have a message in your heart. You have a mastery in your mind. You're looking to get it out to the world. We want to do what we can to help you by sharing other people that have done it, that have pushed outside their comfort zones, that have been the typical Joe Schmo and done big things. Today, we speak to an awesome Joe Schmo. Her name is Melanie Schambach. She is no longer that. She is a Latinx-Canadian social artist whose work delves into humanism, sociology, identity through participatory visual arts. She's got 2 decades of experience, has orchestrated dozens of community-based projects that bridge sectors, generations, and cultures. Amazing story that she talks about bridging a Native American tribe with Episcopalian church through art. That's what a social artist is. She will answer that in today's podcast as well. Her art has been featured globally, from traditional paintings to virtual murals, including exhibits at the Seattle Art Museum, Carnegie Museum of Natural History, and Harbour Centre. She's incredible. What we talk about is, I got emotional towards the end. So I really think you're going to like it. She talks about how we all have this unique message within us. An artist is finding that and breaking through the walls of perfectionism that this world has embedded in like everything we do. She actually gives examples of how to start breaking through that crust that's been embedded with us with perfectionism, like the tools to use, what we should be creating for ourselves, and the power of what can happen once we do that. So I really do hope you love it. I'm going to pass it over to me in just a second, because today's episode, just like all of ours, is brought to you by Leader. Over the last 8 years, Leader has developed the tools and skills needed to help get your authentic message out to the world through speaking and business building. Leader has helped now over, I think it's 750 clients land TEDx talks, and thousands more speak on virtual and physical stages around the world. So if you have that message that you're looking to get out on stage and you want to know the frameworks and the skills it takes to do so, there's links in the description below. Feel free to check them out while you're down there. Like and subscribe. That really helps us spread our message. And also, if you have this mastery, and it's less speaking, but it's more of a business, Leader has also helped businesses get started with their authentic message, showing them how to scale their business authentically and sustainably for years and years to come. We have clients that are selling $83,000 a month. That's important because that's $1 million years. We have some clients that do less, but they're getting the message out and they're doing it the right way where they can feel it in their heart. So if that's you, again, click the links in the description below. You can also comment below and I'll check it out. But that being said, we hope you dig the podcast. Over to Dylan and Melanie. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to It's a Matter of Speaking, a podcast for leading voices, episode 37. I'm your host, Dylan, and today I am blessed to be around Melanie Schambach, who we both might be saying that name wrong, correct?
That's correct.
Melanie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Oh, it's lovely to be here.
We are going to be talking about art, creativity, being the creator. I watched a couple of the videos on your website. Amazing website, by the way.
Thank
And
you.
we're going to be talking about the relationships that art can form. But if you're new to this, I ask everyone the same question to start, and then a bunch of different ones. We're a podcast for leading voices. And for me, leading voices is getting your voice out to the world, like being at the forefront of it and not being afraid to get your message out there. You're doing this with your art, right? You're doing this with communities. But for you specifically, what does it mean to be a leading voice in your
Hmm.
industry?
I mean, I don't know if it's in my industry, but for me and the spaces that I've been and in art, when it's about connecting people,
Hmm.
a leading voice is being able to pass on the microphone and making sure that you're opening the circle so that everyone's voice can be part of it.
Hmm. I love that. Yeah, we're going to talk about how many. I
Mhm.
mean, you work in the public sector, the private sector, with a bunch of different people. So your whole aspect is one, get that voice out there, and then pass that on to someone so it can continue. And
Yeah, I believe. The more that we can expand the circle so that voices can come in, then we can start exercising a practice of really listening to each other with curiosity so we can understand each other's stories and context for perspective,
mhm,
and then that way you can really pull in a collective leadership
hmm,
so that through our understanding of what our needs are as a group, then we can lead.
hmm.
Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
it's almost like you need to know what every voice at the table has to say before that table can move forward, right? It's not just one voice being like, this is what it is. It's this is what the collective voice has to say. And what I'm excited for this podcast, Melanie, is it's for any of our listeners out there that like they want to make change. They want to be a thought leader, but not they're like, I just don't know if I can do it with my voice, or I see people speak and maybe that's not for me. You're doing it through your art, right? And of course your voice as well, but it sounds like passing on that mic is like this message echoes for eternity if you can continue to pass that mic on to the next person. Do you know what that message, like if it continues to echo, do you know what that message would be in generations to come that you're trying to get across?
Well, I don't think there is the one message, right?
Hmm.
Like each one of us has one. Maybe it's not much about the message is one aspect of it. I'm not sure if I really got your answer,
Mm-hmm.
your question right, but if I get it, is that I don't think it's about the message,
Mm-hmm.
but it's about how we relate to each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's almost like, well, it's an expression of the message. And it's not a like kind of like what I just said at the table. The message would be everybody has that voice to move forward. It's not just one that's going to dominate it all.
Hmm.
Do you I love story. Do you
We can hear
remember
more puppies.
do you need to grab them real quick?
No, they're just talking to neighbors. If you can't hear them, then we're all good.
Okay, I can, but I mean they're more than welcome into this. Uh being an artist, I know a lot of artists can be like, "Oh, it's just I've always been an artist," and we're all artists. That's one of the things you and I are going to talk about. But was there a specific moment in your life where you're like, "This is my calling"?
Hmm. So yeah, there's a lot there because I do really think that we need to like paddle back
Mm-hmm.
and unfold what this idea of being an artist is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that if we go back to the understanding that we all have the right to express our humanity, and that art is a way of expressing our authenticity, which has been an ancestral paradigm on how art as authentic expression integrates. And we've been dancing and singing and telling stories since time immemorial. And so when we regenerate that sense that we all have a way to express our humanity through art, then this idea of whether you're an artist or I'm not an artist, it kind of just dissolves.
Mm.
That we have this Western understanding of what art is, based on skill and competition and professionalism and a curriculum and being recognized, and whether you apply for a grant or you show up on a space, there's certain criterias
Mhm.
that frame you as an artist and what isn't. But I think after spending 20 years and thousands of hours with just humans playing with paint and rollers and sponges, and um, those Western understandings of art really just become irrelevant,
Mhm.
and we just really just dive in that enjoyment of being human and being vulnerable
Mhm.
as when we jump into that creative process, it's terrifying because you have to face uncertainty, you have to be willing to fail, you're going to be seen in this vulnerability of uncertainty and failing, but when we do that with grace and joy and in company of one another, then just art can be such a beautiful container for us to connect in a very one-on-one real way.
All right, a good point with what you just said there, right? Because you've worked with so many people that have like pushed past this barrier and they've fully expressed themselves in the vulnerability of like their art. And I was watching someone on the video on your website. He's like, "I'm the creator," right? When you can create this, like,
Yeah,
I'm the creator. It's beautiful, but
it's a lot of
it's
power.
yeah, but it's so hard to come out. Like, I'm
Yeah.
curious with everything. You have decades of art experience. I'm curious, like, either where in the timeline, like, of history or where in our psyche do you feel this judgment comes from that hinders so many people of getting that voice out there?
Yeah. Yeah, this is a great question, and I think there's a lot of ways that you can talk about this, and I'll choose to talk about perfectionism. I think that perfectionism is enmeshed in this image ideal that we've created for a few to be very powerful in the world, right? So
Mhm.
you have to um, look in a certain way, speak in a certain way, have this many degrees, this big house, and I think that the whole world is constantly selling us stuff
Mhm.
and making us being resistant with power by feeling really shitty about ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm.
you know I think it's like stacked with layers of unprocessed pain and shame through many generations,
Yeah.
and it goes way back, also many generations ago, of white body supremacy ideals that we've internalized,
Mhm.
and I think we walk this world just striving really hard to be perfect without really realizing that it's taking away our mental freedom,
Mhm.
our emotional freedom, our spiritual freedom. And so I find beautiful in art. I have so many, like thousands of people that come to me being like, "Oh, no, 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 I don't do art. I'm not interested."
Yeah.
But you could see like there's like this desire of like going towards the crayons,
Mhm.
or like being mesmerized by the colors mixing, and it just takes like one little bit of really letting go of the idea of how this is supposed to look like, softening that hurt of that someone in their childhood told them that they were not creative
Yeah.
enough, because I hear that thousands of times, and just being in the moment by seeing the colors and breathing and enjoying, and just really going deep into the process of creating art. Just being in the moment is is a moment of relief that you don't need to chase this hamster wheel of perfectionism.
Yeah. Because you're saying it's like that perfectionism, one, has been embedded into us from a young age.
Yeah.
Going back to like how we were indoctrinated by specific tribes, right, throughout history. And then on top of that, one of the things that I don't know if you were saying it, but I wrote down, it's like we see it all over now in the media. It's just everything's constantly in our face. that it's we have all these comparisons of, oh, I'm not that, therefore
Mhm.
I shouldn't.
Mhm.
Man,
And it works, right? By design, like it's really disempowering, and that level of and this is just my opinion, of course, but I feel like that level of disempowering can be very powerful to be able to control, like how many billions of us are now,
eight. I
right?
think we're coming around eight bill. Wild.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, and I think I want to also mention something about you said about our childhood. When we grew up, and there's right, as little beings, we come into this world without ideals of perfectionism, and we want to draw on the walls and scribble and uh, do mud pies with our feet on the ground with the soil, right? And it's just really about expressing that humanity in that moment. And what's the first thing that we do? No, not
yeah, yeah,
drawing on the
it's
walls, and
crazy.
that's like imprinted.
Mm,
Oh, what, you're gonna bring all this mud into the house, and then the boom, that gets imprinted.
mm.
So when I create this space, these containers of painting, it's how do we just really celebrate messiness, celebrate impulse, spontaneity, and not really worrying about how this is going to look like at the end.
As a father of a 16-month-old now, I needed to hear that, so I really appreciate it. I think we had our first like something on the wall because we have all white walls, and I remember, thankfully my son wasn't there, but I said something to my wife. I'm like, oh, look it, we already started here. But now it's going to be a trigger to remind myself, like, oh, he's expressing himself, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
cool. I have some tips as a parent if you want. Things that I feel.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, why don't we
yeah.
just go right into that? I had another question, but
Mhm.
selfishly, I want the tips for being a fucking parent.
There is something really powerful in the way how we respond to little people's art.
Mm,
Instead of saying, "Oh, that looks like a tree," right?
mm-hmm.
Because then now you're telling the
Putting
kid
my
that
thoughts on
if
his
it's
expressions.
representational,
Yeah.
then it's good, and if it's not representational, it's not good. Something that we do all the time unconsciously, and it's it really doesn't celebrate the expression of the human.
Hmm.
So I would exchange it with something like, "Wow, how did it feel like doing that?
Hmm.
And what did it make you feel? Or what does it mean to you? If the tree could speak, what would it be saying?"
Okay.
And another one for this thing on the walls. If drawing is scribbling on the walls is becomes a problem because it's expensive to repaint them or
Thank you for
to
understanding. Thank you for understanding.
yeah. Um, how about maybe just gifting them one wall of the
Mm.
house or apartment or creative space, or just one place where they can just go free fall, and maybe you're putting paper with Mod Podge on the wall that you can just put paper on top of each other so that it they can doodle again and again and again.
Love that. No, I love that. And it's
Those
the
are two things.
the first thing that you said of like, instead of saying, "Hey, this is what I think it is," right? And now he's like, he has standards that he's got to live up to. It's more like, "Hey, how did you feel? Hey, if it could talk, what it could say." Because my true love is showing parents the power of imagination and creativity. It's almost like you start to go backwards when you ask those questions, because I think it starts with imagination and then it's expressed through creativity, right?
Hmm.
We see this expression, and then to be able to ask the questions that can go back into, hey, what is he saying, right? It's back into this young kid's imagination
Yeah.
where there are no rigid judgments or boundaries or structures.
Hmm.
You do this a lot now with people that you work with, right? I almost think it's easier to do it because I have such a blank
Hmm.
slate with a 16-month-old. You work with people of all ages. You are
Hmm.
what we call a social artist. Now, I clearly know what that means. But let's say there were people that were listening into this podcast that didn't know what social artist meant. What is a
Hmm.
social artist?
Hmm. I'm careful about giving definitions. So,
Oh yeah, we're going right back into like,
if anybody hears that, please do your research on this kind of stuff.
what do
For
you
me, what
think?
it
Yeah,
means
what
to
do
me,
you feel and think when you say
it is
social artist?
when you engage a group of people in the arts process and together dive into our collective creativity to tackle, reflect, ponder on issues
Mm-hmm.
that are affecting us, or issues that can um, celebrate the human spirit. At the same time, in the process, we try to dismantle as much as we can inherited power dynamics, so that we are exploring, experimenting ways that we can be with one another that are loving,
Hmm.
that are inclusive, that are equitable, that there's so many stories out there that are being misheard or misrepresented. And so for us to come in a group where there is people are coming in from all different kinds of hierarchies in the spaces that they're at, we're living a very real dissociation of each other, and it's just painful to watch. And so when we come into the space, what are the formats, the setting, the words that you're using, the space that you're creating, so that those hierarchies can stay outside of the door as much as we can.
Mm.
As much as we can. I mean, I yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you said it twice after it came into my mind, because it's how I took it, of like, you really get a chance to dismantle hierarchies and everyone starts on this even playing field because you're creating something together.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then when you can dismantle these hierarchies and everyone's at ground floor together to talk about this, there's a lot that's there. Do you, before we kind of get into like the nuts and bolts of what you do, which might be
Yeah.
difficult because I'm sure it's
Could I
different for every
just
person.
add something to that?
Yeah.
Are you moving away from the hierarchy?
I was going to come back to it, but yeah, you
Okay.
you can talk about the hierarchy. Go ahead.
If there's Guess who is the person who resists to being part of a creative process the most?
Give me some, like, can I get multiple choice here?
Um,
Choice A.
choice A would be the quietest person in the
Mm-hmm.
room. B being the person who has something a lot more exciting outside of the room,
Mm-hmm.
like you know, and the C being the person on the top of the hierarchy,
Mm-hmm.
the CEO, the ED, the
Yeah.
mhm.
And the question was what again? Which one is the most resistant?
Yeah,
I'm gonna guess C.
yeah,
Is it?
yeah.
Okay. I was torn
Oh,
between
like
C
to
and
the
B.
T every time.
Re-
It's beautiful to watch, like to the T every time.
huh.
Every time is that CEO or the chair of the board or the executive director or the chief commander, right? They're interested enough about social arts to invite me
Right.
to their group. But once we are, you know, clapping and singing and telling stories and being silly and using your bodies as sculptures, it's fascinating to see how it's just like terrified,
Huh.
because it's very vulnerable. And in these positions, when you're put in a pyramid, there's these masks. I mean, I'm generalizing.
Right.
I'm
Right.
sure
Right.
people feel differently.
Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah,
there are
in the
definitely.
spirit of yeah. And I and and then now it's like bringing back that human self as we open a circle where we're all in the same level,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're asked to follow your impulse in doing something creative where you might fail, and you might sound very imperfect, and now you have the whole group, right, to see you in that vulnerability. Some of these folks are get terrified, and then a lot of it's on me as a facilitator of being able to acknowledge that I need to dismantle power dynamics as much as possible so everyone's heard, and at the same time attending this really just childhood needs,
Hmm.
like child level needs. It's beautiful when it works.
One thing that's coming up to me is like, I always talk about uncomfort, like this uncomfort zone, right? And one would think, for the most part, like someone that's been a CEO, they're like, I consistently get outside my comfort zone, and that's what led me to where I'm at. But the
Mhm.
way we're talking about this, it's almost like there's a big difference between just being uncomfortable and then being vulnerable. Because that
Mhm.
person, that chief commander, like you're saying, that person's at the top. They can feel like they have the biggest light shining on them, and it's like, well, I don't know if I could be that creative or imaginative. How
Mhm.
do you, like you say, you go back to the child aspect, but actual, what are some of the things you do or some of the things you say to start to break down
Mhm.
those walls? Because there might be someone listening right now that's like, that's how I feel with vulnerability. Maybe I'm not a CEO, but I feel like I have these walls up. What are some things they can start to ask themselves or do to chip away
Mhm.
at that?
It looks different in every scenario,
Mm-hmm.
but for the sake of answering this question, I have so much trust in the materials,
Mm-hmm.
the process of being able to stay present and playing with the visual aspect of arts, what is tangible. Uh, we coming from curiosity, really, the work, only that person can do that work.
Mm-hmm.
And the only role that I can play here is providing the right tools and the right space. So knowing when, if I get too close to vulnerability, that then that reptilian brain is just going to hijack and try to run away from the lion, well, that's not really going to work. And so in the arts, you have a universal language on being able to pull the body back, and dancing with the emotions, and being able to not lose the person in that moment. And with that, in social arts, it's so much enmeshed in storytelling that when there is a window of the role of the witness is very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
When you're witnessing the expressions of other people around you, I mean, if we want to get into science, there's these mirror neurons that get activated that allow us to feel and the experiences of the other, and then there's empathy. And I think that when that's weaved into the participatory format, the process, that's connecting to our humanity. And 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 when you really create that space, then those hierarchies that have been internalized just become more quiet in that moment.
um, I want to, after you saying that, I'm like, man, I hope me taking notes isn't the wrong mirror for you to express yourself right now. I'm like, is that bad? Because I'm taking it all in. I think
Yeah.
that's beautiful, right? It's like, especially a small town Midwest, it can be easy for like like that laughter to come up. But to
Hmm.
really be with someone when they're in this vulnerable state of expressing themselves is so important. Yeah, if
Hmm.
I could challenge you, though, that's if you have someone around. What if someone was listening right now and they were trying to break down their own walls and they're being an artist in isolation? And I'm not saying isolation is a bad thing, but it's like they're like, I want to start expressing myself in my room and in an
Hmm.
art. Like, what are things that they can do to? And everything's different, but do you have like a couple of small things to?
Ooh, I
You know.
love it. I love it. I love it. Yes. Creating space, the space is important, and the time is important, and the intention is important.
Mm,
So you make a space where you hopefully won't be as interrupted or being, and then you set a time. Okay, I'm going to do this for 15 minutes, or I'm going to do this for 1 hour. And the most important is the intention.
mm,
Why are you doing this for? And so, in that intention, I'm even inviting you to say, as soon as I finish this, I'm going to um, paint over it,
ooh, burn
or I'm
it
going, or I'm going to burn
or
it,
throw it away.
or I'm going to, I don't know. It depends on the
Right.
materials. You can dissolve it in water,
Mm-hmm.
or
Ooh. I love this, and it's very easy because there's a number attached to it. We always talk about number brain when we're,
mm,
TikTok nowadays is like quick information. Well, the three things you can do is set a clear space for your creativity, a clear time, even like you say, it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then a clear intention of going in. And I think you and I were actually talking about this before we went live of setting how I set New Year's intentions rather than goals, which are expectations, right? You're not going to be going
yeah,
in and being like, I'm going to draw a tree or I'm going to draw. It's like, no, I want to express this. I want to
yeah,
feel this. I love
Yeah.
it. And you do this in a social aspect. Do you have any like cool stories or examples of like this radical collaboration of people getting together, hierarchies toppling, and you know, the top of the business working? Like, do you have any great examples?
Yeah, so many.
Yeah, but give me at least one.
Yeah, I'll give you one of a moment that was very like powerful for me to be as a witness,
Mm-hmm.
and another example that can be more practical.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine this actually happened. Cathedral, big, tall um, doors, and in front of it there is a line of Salish indigenous women saging nuns as they're walking through the doors of the cathedral. Every There's hundreds of people around here of different walks of life, different skin colors, different languages. And we're all guided through the doors of the cathedral. We sit down, organized in like wooden benches. It was so quiet, you would hear a butterfly just flap its wings. And we're just staring at the front. And we have a Salish indigenous chief leader side by side, wearing a headdress, side by side with an Episcopal priest with a white collar.
Hmm.
And before they even start speaking, they look at each other and they embrace with a big bear hug. Just like tears can roll down my face.
Hmm.
I didn't think I was going to see this in my lifetime after learning about residential schools and missing indigenous women in Canada and in Guatemala. That's where my family is from. And, the disparate proportions of folks of color and indigenous folks in Canada in jail, mass suicides of indigenous youth. And this moment, anyways, the chief comes, grabs the microphone, and he says, to face global challenges, we need to come in as one. And so what really brought us together was a totem pole. It was a totem that was created by master carver Jewel James with the family of the House of Tier Carvers. And they give these totem poles to different peoples, individuals, nations to honor their resistance. And this particular totem pole was to honor Beaver Creek Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Beaver Creek Nation. To There were resistance of fossil fuels for the tar sands in Alberta, and that's what I mean about radical collaborations. It's very easy to stay on one side and just point the finger. And it's much, much more difficult to be able to come together and listen to each other, seeing each other's humanity while having different points of views
Hmm.
on whatever it is. But seeing each other's humanity, and it's this totem pole that had so much spirit and prayer and power is what's really bringing all these people together to this cathedral.
So fascinating. Because it's something with art, right? So what's going on in my mind is you see these people come together that you would never think coming together. Episcopalian pastor and Native American. Did you say chief? I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
Chieftain, right? And I forgive any ignorance that might come out with how direct this word is because I love creativity, right? But how? What is it about art at its core that can affect like policy changes or connection? Like, what is that with art that can do that?
hmm I think there's a lot of levels that you could answer that. There's the level of reconnecting with our humanity that inevitably, indirectly would affect policy, right?
Mm-hmm.
The relationship that we have with the self, that it goes so deep that it dissolves to the relationship that we have with the world. Uh, is like what comes first, the chicken or the egg,
Yeah.
right? Like we are creators of our understanding of the world. And so all this that happens inside, I think that art can be a portal to reconnect with the essence of our humanity. In more practical sense, like in a more systemic and community level, that I've seen social art affecting policy, which was the other example that I wanted to share with you. I've been able to be part of projects where, through an arts based process, um, we can gather stories that then, connecting with academics or community organizers or activists, we can translate these art stories into, you know, written pieces of paper that can affect policy.
Hmm.
At other times, we invite decision makers to be part of the creative process so that they can understand these stories experientially and not so much just from a cognitive level.
Hmm.
There's many boards for him, for example. There's a classic example with boards on how they're making major decisions to groups of people, to communities, to even as the people that they're serving, whether there's big disconnect of the experiences between the people that they're serving and the life that they have. And so when they're doing their strategic planning, right, they're looking at numbers and data and research that maybe a strategic planner did with surveys. It can get very heady,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so how do we how do we really bring back the human spirit, in the sense of the how do we humanize the process of making policy? And so I find that with art, we can either create spaces where the people that this organization or university, or whether or even a private, social, or public sector,
Mm-hmm.
spaces where folks from different levels of decision making power can be together to really listen each other's stories. And so that then, from that internalized connection of the humanity of that person, they can inform their decisions of making decisions. They can inform their decisions better.
Yeah, because like you're really getting everyone's story with it. When you say cognitive, what's coming into my mind is like if I'm sitting behind a desk reading paper all day, reading words all day, it's very heady. It's very like it's just very cognitive, right? It just feels very analytical. It feels very um, left brain, right?
Hmm.
Whereas when people come together and they're expressing themselves through art, right, through their imagination, we're actually seeing that creativity, and it's almost like you could you could see the same thing expressed in art that you might read in words and have a completely different understanding with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Just to land it, I have
Yeah.
um, something I'm going through right now with one of the projects. There's these young women who really want to share a message on the difficulties of gendered Islamophobia in Canada. But now that I'm living in this place we call the US, I see that it's very similar patterns.
Mhm. Real
And
quick,
it's
I'm
very
so sorry. You said gender
Islamophobia.
Islamophobia. Sorry.
Mhm. And with with the genocide that is happening and that we are witnessing right now, and with the way how we've been, by design, um, separated from each other's points of views, people are really making a lot of decisions based on the things that they read, uh, that I what builds your identity of who you are, based on theories of being accepted, on a lot of misinformation, but so it's very different when you hear the story from this one person through art and their images, and you can hear their voice, and you can read their words and see the colors. I think there's a, a window of understanding it of it's a window to this person's soul.
Mm.
So I know this is kind of like tricky to try to put it into words because
It's
words,
what's the
yeah,
irony of it all, right? It's like
and
we're
I have to, yeah, and I have to be careful about the words that I use because then you lose people just by the way how you frame these
Mhm.
concepts and stories.
Yeah, what
But
I've
I think that art and visual art steps away from all of that clutter.
Mhm.
And I think that it can become a portal to really see the other person, that is behind that art piece by the human that they are.
it's one of the things that you've said now. I think that was the second or third time because I've underlined it already of seeing art, or symbolism as this portal to somebody and who they are, which really bridges this connection rather than just written descriptive words for
Can you
someone.
say that one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, I underlined it twice. I was saying of like really landing this point of art or symbolism, as that's my own interpretation, is a portal into
Hmm.
someone and who they are at their core to
Hmm.
bridge connection
Hmm.
rather than just this like we're talking through description right now with our words rather than just description through talking, which can feel mundane in certain areas. Art is just uh, fast track to that person at their core, and it
Hmm.
touches something in us too, which is why I feel it bridges that connection. And this is then the last question that I'll have before I like to go into our own uncomfort zone of the podcast. You talk about, which you hear from artists often, is you say everyone's an artist.
Hmm.
So everyone has this ability to use symbolism, use their art for people to see them at their core. Why do you believe that? Because I think a lot of times we hear it descriptively, everyone's an artist. Why do you believe it in your core?
uh, in short, social integration. So social integration means expanding the circle so that everyone's unique way of being can be part of the circle.
Mm-hmm.
To do that in a group is very difficult. So what is the first thing that I need to do? Let's, you know, let's land that we've been taught that art is about competition and skill. And so I need to remind folks of our different ancestral paradigm. Like this is ancestral. This is not something I make up. This is something we've been doing for thousands of years. And then it's that art as authentic expression integrates. Art as authentic expression integrates. And I've seen this happening through a loop of going from impulse to uncertainty, uncertainty to authenticity, authenticity to integration. When we go impulse, then we face uncertainty. That gets us to authenticity and integration. I could talk more about that, but I know that we're trying to master the art of reduction here.
Mm-hmm.
So, in short, I think that when I started making paintings in a hallway with a bunch of other artists, it was fun and terrifying because I was trying to be perfect. But I knew that there was something else. I was doing without knowing, now looking back, I think I did my own therapy. Like it was became my survival. And I went to art school thinking that I could make a profession out of it. But I think it was really just my survival. I was coming from really difficult, dark chapters in my life. And if it wasn't for art, maybe I wouldn't be here with you. And when I discovered that reconnection with myself and the reconnection that I started having with the people and the world around me through art, I knew that there was something a lot more interesting about art than what I was being taught in art school. So I had to unlearn these Western ideas of what art is and really see how this ancestral paradigm around authenticity and being a glue for community and expressing our humanity. And I was like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm in.
Yeah, it's like you learn it deeper. It's like first you have to learn like what everyone says you should learn, and then you fall in love with this mastery, and then you can learn it at a different level, a deeper
Mhm.
level. So when you say everyone at their core is an artist, we have to first deconstruct what we think art is, which is that everybody at their core is purely authentic,
Mhm.
and that is not perfect in modern society standards. It's perfect at our core. But when you can fully get into your authenticity and who you are, that's what breeds integration. And the only reason we have an impulse on it is because we have been told through competition and all this stuff that art needs to have order, or it needs to have this checklist mentality. Once you get through that, you get to your own authenticity.
Mhm.
This is deep. This is
Beautifully
deep.
said. Yeah,
Uh,
beautifully said.
that was, you said it, I just repeated it. Thank you. No, this is a deep podcast, and I really, really, really appreciate it. Last couple of questions, and it might be a bit repetitive, but I like to ask everybody,
Okay.
when it comes to you being an artist and fully expressing yourself, why did you decide to get outside your comfort zone?
Mhm. Yeah, when I think about comfort zone, I think about other things, but what came in that moment when you
Yeah.
said that, I think that if I didn't go deeper to understand this universe, I don't think I would have made it.
Hmm.
I don't
Yeah.
think I would have made it. And so that was the I don't think I had options.
Yeah.
I had to, yeah, I had to dive in.
There's something that comes up in me as well. It's like I would have finished this lifetime seeing it all in black and white, and I want to
Mhm.
see it with color. Um, Now the second question is tough after that, and I always tell people it's like this is judgment hats off when I ask this question. But there are
Okay.
people out there that they struggle to get outside their comfort zone. And let's say even
Mhm.
if we keep it in the realm of art, why do you feel most people don't get outside that
Mhm.
comfort zone?
Mhm. 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 And this goes with like me too.
Yeah.
Like most people and me too, like a big resistance. I'll bring back this word around perfectionism. To put it in simple short words, perfectionism is a huge one.
Hmm.
When we're striving to be perfect, it's because we're afraid of failing, we're afraid of uncertainty, right? We live in a highly uncertain world. It's very scary, so it's very easy to stay in our comfort zone, that everything's telling us that we're going to be okay and everything's going to be all right. And so I get it, like it happens to me all the time. So how do we step into that? Let's not call it fear, like let's call it like all that uh, body sensations of resistance when we're about to create something new, when we're about to go into the unknown, when we're about to just fail.
Hmm.
And here, jumping into the how is like knowing that when we have the gut to like really go through that and like lean into those body sensations that we interpret as fear, then is like, oh yeah, we'll be willing to fail.
Hmm.
And it's only in this world of the unknown that massive opportunities are going to come in our way. And I think that art is very cushiony, because I've also done these deep dives where it's terrifying to integrate it back into my life.
Yeah.
And so the cushiony of the arts can get us um, a container where we can exercise those brain muscles,
Yeah.
so that we can really find the gems, the jewels of growing through struggle.
Yeah, because it's in that when you said earlier, I wrote it down with like impulse and then it's uncertainty or even the unknown. It is also in there because you said right after that is authenticity. Right after that is those jewels.
Mhm. Exactly.
Um, Man, I don't show my emotion like as visually as some people do, but man, I just felt emotional with the last couple answers that you had.
Mm.
So I want to honor that and I want to really respect
Thank
today's
you.
podcast. Um, and regretfully, it's coming to an end. Melanie, this Schambach, maybe. It was so fun talking to you today on the podcast. I took
Thank
some
you.
notes. I'm gonna do some recap for the listeners here. Absolutely incredible from the very beginning of like being a leading voice is being someone that is willing to pass on the mic for that next person to pick up and know that what you're saying is that message isn't a finite message. It's the fact that everybody at the table has a voice and to continue to pass that on because the breakthroughs that can happen when we dismantle this hierarchy and give everyone a voice to express themselves. And for some people, it is difficult for them to express. The people sometimes at the highest parts of an organization that you work with because perfectionism is embedded in everything that we do. But if you have the right tools, if you have the right space, we can unlock this authenticity in us. And if anyone's been listening, if you want 3 things that you can leave here and do, it's 3 things to create space for yourself in your house, in your apartment, in your living. Set a time, give yourself a time frame in which to be creative in, and then set an intention or the why. And then when other people are expressing themselves, give them the mirror that you'd want, right? Really be with them presently. It's something that you taught me on this. I'm like, I want to make sure I'm being as present as possible because at the end of it, art connects us to both our humanity and to each other. Art is a portal for you to see me at my core and vice versa. And when we have the gall, the guts, the stones, the gumption to push through that uncertainty and unknown that comes after the impulse of expressing ourselves, that's where the gems are. That's where the authenticity is. You are an incredible voice and microphone for this generation and the next. Melanie, thank you so much for being on this podcast.
Thank you.
For anyone curious of like, how can I be around this energy more? Melanie's on social media. She also has her own website, melanieschambach.com. We will put all of it in the description below. You can ask questions in the comments. While you're down in the comments, make sure you like and subscribe. You can ask questions. We will look at them. She will look at them and get back to you. And as always, we will see you in weeks to come for the next episode of A Matter of Speaking, a podcast for leading voices. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And Melanie, thank you for shining your light.
Thank you.